Hello. Our topic is worry. Now, you may not have ever thought this, but actually your brain is a prediction machine. It was designed to help you survive. What it does is look into the future and say, think about this, be careful of that, the other might happen. And so it's really useful. But sometimes our brains, or we, go too far. And our urge to protect ourselves goes into overdrive. And what we get is something akin to worry. What if? Yes, but what if? Yes, but what if? And if we're not careful, this turns into a habit. And while that habit has a very good purpose, that being protection, thinking forwards, we actually pay quite a price for it. So that's interesting. Worry is a sort of magical thinking. By that I mean that somewhere in the back of our minds, we have a belief that if I worry hard enough and long enough, it won't happen. But actually, we're never really clear what it is. And my invitation to you today is to think about the things you worry about and actually work with them. 4 points and then some questions. The first point is listen to yourself and find out what you are actually saying. So what's going on in the back of your mind? There's a fantasy running. Find out what the fantasy is and dispute it with facts. By that I mean, on one hand, say to yourself, okay, I'm creating this fantasy, this idea, this worry that such and such might happen, and I have some facts. And the facts are these, and you dispute by bringing them together and just thinking, gosh, isn't that interesting? In other words, let me invite you to shine the light of common sense on what you're worried about. But as with all things, recognize that worry has a useful purpose. It's just probably got out of hand a bit. It is an attempt at self-protection. Honour that. So don't beat yourself up because you're worrying. And interrupt the recurring cycle of incomplete, scary thoughts that goes round and round and round. So, that's the thinking about worry. Let me ask you some questions, give you some questions to be thinking about. If your brain is a prediction machine, what are you predicting? And please, when you sit and think about this, actually do conclusive thinking. Don't just break off in the middle, because that's the power of worry. It stops us from thinking things through to their conclusion. And so they have this strange power over us, because actually we don't know what we are worrying about. So, question 1, what are you predicting? Question 2, how likely is that to happen? And you might like to answer the question, why is that likely? Rather than simply saying, yes. How likely is that to happen? 3, 2, 1. Third question, Describe the worst case scenario. So think your worry through. What'll happen next? What'll happen next? What might happen next? And then, next question, if the worst happens, how will you cope? Anything's a coping mechanism, but how will you cope? And then, describe the best case scenario. Yeah, what if the what if doesn't happen? What's the best case scenario? Then you could ask yourself, have I ever predicted the worst before? Followed by the question of, and did that happen? Did it come true? And finally, 2 more questions. What does it give you to worry like this? And I'm thinking here about psychological benefit. So in other words, people might give you some recognition for all the worrying you're doing. So what does it give you to worry like this? And finally, and what does it cost you?